Hello, and welcome to BattleTech Faction Briefings. Today, we return to the Draconis Combine to follow one of the stranger Combine units, who would gain the nickname of the Hungry Ghosts. They have slaughtered innocents, they are a lightweight mech unit, and they have a silly emblem. Today, we are discussing the 36th Dieron Regulars. The Dieron Regulars have a striking brigade emblem of a compass with a glowing sun in the middle. It also resembles a crosshair with the sun as the target, which may be a reference to a consistent enemy. The regimental emblem of the 36th has changed over the years. The original symbol was the crest with their number, which they had prior to 3025. Later, they used a ghost atop a shuriken with a sunburst in the background. It is the basis of their nickname, and it either references a longtime enemy or the Dieron Regulars Brigade symbol. The 36th uses standard colors of the Dieron Regulars. They use white with gold stripes as their parade colors. But when on deployment, the Dieron Regulars use local camouflage to give them an edge in battle. The 36th Dieron Regulars do not have a complex history, but they do take part in many important battles. To skip spoilers, go to the time listed. The Dieron Federation was brought into the Terran hegemony in 2316. However, many people from that nation wanted to be part of the Draconis Combine. Thus, the Dieron Regulars were made as a unit in exile, waiting to take back their homeland. They would remain on the Combine hegemony border, and their leadership had strong diplomatic skills to prevent outright war with their former homeland. By the time the Star League was formed, the Dieron Regulars had an exclusive academy on Shimonita called the Dieron Warriors Academy. This would also increase the number of Dieron regiments stationed along the Combine border. As the Star League fell apart, many of the former Dieron Federation worlds would be brought into the Draconis Combine. Thus, with very little effort, the Dieron Military District was formed, and the Dieron Regulars finally had a proper home. The Dieron Military District was a very important region of the Combine. It is the governmental zone closest to Terra, and an important staging point in the Succession Wars. This also makes it the region that borders both the Lyran Commonwealth and the Federated Suns. Thus, it was a necessity to have as many units as possible to protect this very important district. Vicious fighting during the Succession Wars brought a need for more soldiers, which led to the expansion of the Dieron Regulars. During the early stages of the war, the 34th, 35th, and 36th Dieron Regulars were created. While the 36th was a green unit, they did see some combat while fighting on the world of Asta. By the end of the war, they would be down to 60% effective while maintaining their garrison on Asta. In the time between the wars, the 36th was built back up to 84%, but more importantly, they moved from a medium-weight unit to a heavyweight unit. This gave them more firepower to defend the region. The 36th would get transferred to Imbros III, a world that bordered the Lyran Commonwealth. They would hold the world for the entirety of the war at great cost. The Second Succession War was brutal to the 36th, as they were beaten down to 18% effective and reduced once again to a medium-weight unit. Over the early years of the war, the 36th Dieron Regulars were brought back to full strength, and mostly kept on garrison work. In 3014, they would be sent to Halstead Station after a large battle there. In the process, a crate of Star League books was found. Chusa Imori Sanders would take the books and go to Murchison in order to appraise them and likely sell them. On Murchison, the mech team delivering the books would get ambushed and destroyed by a lance of Kellhounds. Then, a Shadowhawk would enter the Combine dropship and trick them into thinking it was a delivery. The attack would allow the dropship to be captured by the Kellhounds. This would lead to a counterattack by the Combine, where the Kells would finish off a company of the 36th. 2 years later, they would be sent to Mallory's world in order to reinforce the Second Sword of Light and other DCMS forces that had been in a deadlock against the AFFS defensive regiments. The 36th arrived and was looking forward to taking revenge on the Kellhounds' further defeat in 3014. The 36th would be used as a distraction to draw the 2nd Kellhounds away from the main assault, while the 2nd Sword would hunt down the 1st Kellhound Battalion. The 36th would pin down the 2nd Kells, who then pulled back to escape on their dropships. The 36th allowed them to flee and went to join the 2nd Sword. However, Yorinaga Kurita, commander of the 2nd Sword of Light, would get into a duel with Morgan Kell and lose due to a targeting error or magic, depending on how you want to interpret the story. Yorinaga Kurita would then command all DCMS forces to withdraw from the world. The 36th Dieron regulars would rebuild on Nirasaki, and by 3025 they would be redesigned as a light regiment with standard infantry and vehicle support. Then, in 3026, they would work with the 5th Sword of Light in order to attack Quinton. The 36th would slaughter civilians and refugees in their assault. While the defending mercenaries, Swan's Cavaliers, were away, this would cause the Cavaliers to attack Sorensen's Sabers of the 5th Sword in retaliation. The DCMS forces would take heavy losses prior to retreating from the world. As the war broke out, Capellan Chancellor Maximilian Liao would ask for more Combine support. Thus, the 36th Dieron regulars would work with the 5th Sword of Light once again to take the world of Northwind in 3029. The 36th would push the 5th Deneb Light Cavalry from their defensive positions, and the 5th Sword would crush them. They would then battle Bradley's Bravos, the short-lived 3rd Kellhound Battalion, and Team Bonsai. The mercenaries were sent in order to help the 5th Deneb escape. The mercenaries would hold off the DCMS units until the Genyosha arrived to take down the mercenaries, before continuing their hunt for the Kellhounds and their commander, Morgan Kell. However, the battle ended when the Northwind Highlanders arrived after making a deal with Hans Davian. The sheer numbers of the Highlanders would overwhelm the DCMS forces and cause them to retreat. The 36th were ordered to cover the escape of the 5th Sword. During this fighting withdrawal, a battalion of the 36th were completely destroyed. By August 3029, the 36th would be stationed on Moor, where Theodore Kurita was planning an attack on the Isle of Skye region of the Lyran Commonwealth. The invasion would end in failure, and the 36th would be pulled back to Combine defensive lines. Prior to the war, the 36th Dieron regulars would still be stationed on Nirasaki and rebuilt to full power. As the war broke out, the DCMS leadership wanted to prevent the 2nd Davian Guards from entering the war. DCMS command knew that they would be sacrificing a unit in order to distract the powerful Davian Guards. The leadership believed it was worth sacrificing a unit in order to slow down the FedCom war machine. Thus, the 36th were chosen for this high-risk operation on Fomalhaut in July. When the 36th arrived, the 2nd Davian Guards had left to attack Altair. However, the world was not undefended. The local militia had 5 regiments of conventional forces and were trained in anti-mech tactics. Despite the odds, the 36th crushed the local forces. The Dieron regulars held the world and fought local rebellions as the war came to a conclusion. By the end of the war, they were still stationed on Fomalhaut. They would have to deal with more rebellions, but would maintain Combine control of the world. The 2nd Davian Guards wanted their world back, and would start doing unauthorized raids on Fomalhaut, starting in 3040. Even after the refugees were moved from the world in 3041, the Davian Guards would still raid the world over the years in hopes of taking it back. Interestingly, in 3042, interstellar expeditions would begin an archaeological dig that was financed by Snord's Irregulars. In secret, they found an old bank vault and a collection of old Terra stamps. There was no conflict during this expedition, it was just an interesting footnote in the history of Fomalhaut. Prior to the clan invasion, the 36th would be moved off of Fomalhaut in order to be rebuilt. They would go to Soffel, and they would take the place of the 8th Dieron regulars, who were fresh since they had faced no challenges since the War of 39. The 8th would then take control of the garrison on Fomalhaut. By the beginning of the war, the 36th were not in great shape due to years of fighting with the 2nd Davian Guards. They were stationed on Soffel and had been reduced to green skill status. This was caused by them rebuilding with recruits and the lack of action they saw after leaving Fomalhaut. as the Draconis Combine started getting raided by Clan Smoke Jaguar and Clan Nova Cat. The local forces struggled. Many of the members of the Dieron regulars were sent to the Benjamin or Pesht districts in order to reinforce local defenders and help fight the clan threat. At this point, the 36th seemed to disappear from history. There are two possibilities. The first is that the 36th were sent out to fight the clans and were destroyed. The second option is that after the fighting with the clans was over, the 36th were taken apart to assist in rebuilding the units that had survived the clan onslaught. As they are a lightweight unit, it is more likely they replaced lost recon and light companies of other regiments. Either way, they would cease to be listed as a unit and never rebuilt. The 36th Dieron regulars are a standard Draconis Combine unit. They fight hard and lose with about a 50% regularity. Most of their history is being a garrison unit, and even after they are gone, there is no lamentation for their passing. Being forgotten by Faza doesn't help things either, as their ultimate fate is left vague due to a lack of focus on this unit. Still, they have a fun emblem and show up in a couple campaign books. There are not many notable pilots amongst the soldiers of the 36th Dieron regulars. Haji Rajpuman. He was the commander of the 36th during the late Third Succession War. He would take over after his commander died in the fighting on Mallory's world. He would be involved in the shift of the 36th into a lightweight unit. He would remain in command until the 3040s. Mason Irijanan. The commander prior to the clan invasion. Unlike previous commanders, he would be a Taisa, colonel, rather than a Taisho, general. His command of the unit was short-lived, as they would cease to be a unit shortly after the Battle of Luthien. James Tohiro, the commander of the 2nd Company of the 2nd Battalion, who led the support lance. He battled on Northwind against the mercenary forces and would assist in the DCMS retreat. He piloted a Charger. The 36th Dieron regulars are a DCMS unit, thus they use Draconis Combine mechs, but they had enough battles with the Steiners and the Davians to add some of their mechs to their lineup. They would be noted as a lightweight force, but according to the Northwind Highlanders mission book, the 36th has 3 assaults and 1 heavy in a support lance. This contradiction makes building a team a bit more complicated than one might expect. However, it is also likely these choices exist because this is an older sourcebook and there may have been a miscommunication as to the weight class of the 36th Dieron regulars. By the Third Succession War, the 36th specialized in light mech strike tactics and open field battles. They would focus on speed over firepower in order to overwhelm their enemy with hard-to-hit targets, supported by long-range vehicle and aerofighter strikes. As for support, they have a medium fighter company, reinforced combat vehicle regiment, and a standard infantry regiment. Vehicles are noted as being long-range or fast-moving, in order to play into the general combat strategy of the 36th Dieron regulars. They would also have all the transport vehicles they would need for their missions. Despite being a rare lightweight unit, there isn't much else to make them stand out amongst the other members of the Dieron regulars. There is no fiction from the 36th point of view, but they are referenced in part of the Warrior Trilogy. Despite having a couple important moments during the Third and Fourth Succession War, there is very little about the unit in sourcebooks. Still, there are a couple missions for them as antagonists and other sourcebook entries that contain formation and location data. The 36th Dieron regulars are something of a disappointment for me. After coming across them when working on Sorensen Sabers, I was hoping they would have an exciting history. They had enough battles in the Third and Fourth Succession Wars to give me enough confidence that they would make for an interesting faction briefing. Yet, there really isn't much meat on this bone. I don't think they are boring or even a bad unit, but they are not as exciting as some of the other units I've covered. They are called the Hungry Ghosts. I wanted them to really earn that nickname, and it feels like it just was a random choice by the writers. All that aside, at least they do show up in a few campaign books, giving them a status most regiments cannot boast. Now, while the 36th Dieron Regulars felt like a letdown to me, I do think a Dieron Regulars unit for the tabletop is a great idea for Draconis Combine fans. There is a standard paint scheme for the Dieron Regulars, and that means painting up one set provides you with all the Dieron Regulars for any battle the brigade has faced. Not only that, but they use standard camo in many battles. So if you have a camo painted set, then they can also fill the role of the Dieron Regulars on the tabletop, as well as any other unit that requires the camo paint scheme. Next time, I'll be covering the Headhunter Mercenaries. Then in April, I'm covering units from the Dieron Commonwealth. I want to give a huge thank you to my 1,000 plus subscribers. I am so happy that my channel has grown so much. May your weapons stay hot and your reactors stay cool. Please check out the BattleTech Faction Briefings playlist, and until next time, I'll see you at the tavern.